Well, let me tell you something. My story wasn't easy, but I survived betrayal from someone I trusted most, and I came out stronger than ever. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 73 years old, I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing could have prepared me for what my own daughter-in-law would do to me. It started about 6 months ago. I'd been living in my own home for 47 years, the same house where I raised my 3 children after my husband passed away when they were just teenagers. I worked 2 jobs to keep that roof over their heads, saved every penny I could, and built a life that I was proud of. My eldest son, David, he's always been the responsible one. Married to Sarah for 12 years now, and they have 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, Emma and little Tommy. Sarah had been dropping hints for months about me moving in with them. "Mom Thompson," she'd say with that sweet smile of hers, "you're getting older, and we just worry about you being alone in that big house." At first, I thought it was genuine concern. After all, I did have a few health issues. Nothing major, just the usual stuff that comes with age. High blood pressure, some arthritis, and I needed to take a few medications to keep everything in check. But then things started getting weird. Sarah would come over more frequently, always offering to help with my pills. She'd organize them, count them, ask detailed questions about when I took them and why. I thought she was just being caring, you know? She'd say things like, "Let me help you with your medication schedule, Mom. We want to make sure you're taking everything correctly." I should have trusted my instincts. Something felt off about the way she'd hover around my medicine cabinet, the way she'd insist on being the one to refill my pill organizer. But I wanted to believe the best in her. She was my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren. I convinced myself that she genuinely cared about my well-being. The real turning point came 3 weeks ago. I was feeling particularly unwell one morning. My blood pressure was acting up, and I had this persistent headache. I went to take my morning medications, and I noticed something strange. My pill organizer looked different. The pills were there, but they seemed off. The colors weren't quite right, and some of them looked like they'd been tampered with. I called my pharmacist, Mr. Garcia, who I'd known for 20 years. "Margaret," he said in that concerned voice of his, "when did you last pick up your prescriptions?" I told him I hadn't been to the pharmacy in over a week, that Sarah had been handling my refills. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Thompson," he said carefully, "Sarah picked up your medications yesterday, but she also asked a lot of questions about what would happen if someone didn't take them regularly. She wanted to know about side effects, about what the pills looked like, about generic substitutes." My heart sank. I knew then that my suspicions were correct. Sarah wasn't helping me with my medications. She was sabotaging them. But why? What could she possibly gain from making me sick? I decided to do a little investigating of my own. I started keeping track of how I felt after taking my pills, and I noticed a pattern. On days when Sarah had prepared my medication, I felt worse, much worse. Dizzy, confused, weak. On days when I managed to handle my own pills, I felt like myself again. Then I overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. Sarah was in my kitchen, talking to someone on her phone. She thought I was napping, but I was wide awake, listening from the living room. "The plan is working," she was saying. "She's getting more confused, more dependent. The doctor thinks she might need assisted living soon. Once she's declared incompetent, David will get power of attorney, and we can finally get access to her accounts." My blood ran cold. My own daughter-in-law was trying to make me sick, to make me seem incompetent, so she could get her hands on my money. And apparently my son was in on it too. You see, what Sarah didn't know was that I wasn't just some helpless old lady living on Social Security. I'd been very careful with my money over the years. I'd invested wisely, saved aggressively, and built a substantial nest egg. I owned my house outright, had a healthy retirement account, and several investment properties that I'd bought over the years. I was worth quite a bit more than anyone in my family realized, but I'd kept quiet about it. I didn't want my children to see me as a bank account, to change how they treated me because of money. I wanted them to love me for who I was, not what I could give them. Clearly, that had been a mistake. The family dinner was scheduled for that Sunday. Sarah had been insisting on it for weeks, saying it was time for the whole family to get together and discuss my future. I knew now what that really meant. They were planning to ambush me, to present some kind of united front about putting me in a nursing home. That morning, I got up early and went to my medicine cabinet. Sure enough, Sarah had been there the night before. My pills looked different again, and I could tell they'd been tampered with. Some of them looked like they'd been replaced with placebos. Others looked like they might be something else entirely. I carefully documented everything with my phone, taking pictures of the pills, the containers, everything. Then I went to my safe and pulled out some documents I hadn't looked at in years. My financial statements, my investment reports, my will. It was time to remind my family exactly who they were dealing with. I also called my lawyer, Robert Chen, who'd been handling my affairs for 15 years. "Robert," I said, "I need to make some changes to my will, and I need to do it today." When Sunday arrived, I was ready. I dressed in my best outfit, a navy blue dress that had always made me feel confident and strong. I did my hair and makeup carefully, and I made sure to bring a bottle of wine as my contribution to dinner. Sarah greeted me at the door with that same fake smile. "Mom Thompson, you look lovely. How are you feeling?" "Never better," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "I'm feeling clearer than I have in months." I could see the confusion flash across her face. She'd probably expected me to be foggy and disoriented from whatever she'd done to my medications. Instead, I was sharp as a tack, because I hadn't taken the tampered pills at all. Dinner was tense from the start. David kept shooting looks at Sarah, and she kept trying to steer the conversation toward my health and my living situation. "Mom," David said during the main course, "Sarah and I have been talking, and we're really concerned about you living alone." "Oh, are you?" I said, taking a sip of my wine. "And what exactly concerns you?" "Well," Sarah jumped in, "you've been seeming a bit confused lately. Forgetting things, having trouble with your medications. We think it might be time to consider other options." I set down my wine glass and looked around the table at my family. My other two children, Lisa and Michael, were there with their spouses, and they all looked uncomfortable. Clearly, David and Sarah had been filling their heads with lies about my mental state. "You know," I said, my voice steady and clear, "it's funny you should mention my medications. I've been having some interesting experiences with them lately." Sarah's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "Well," I continued, "I've noticed that on days when you help me with my pills, I feel terrible, confused, weak, disoriented. But on days when I handle my own medications, I feel fine. Strange, don't you think?" The table went dead silent. David was staring at his plate, and Sarah was gripping her fork so tightly her knuckles were white. "I also had an interesting conversation with my pharmacist," I went on. "He told me about some very unusual questions you've been asking about my medications, Sarah. Questions about what would happen if someone didn't take them, about side effects, about generic substitutes." I was just trying to help," Sarah stammered. "Help with what exactly?" I asked. "Help me become incompetent so you and David could get power of attorney? Help me seem confused so you could convince everyone I needed to be put away?" The silence in the room was deafening. Lisa and Michael were staring at their older brother in shock, and Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about," David said, but his voice was shaky. "Oh, I think you do," I said. "I think you both know exactly what I'm talking about. You see, I heard your phone conversation last week, Sarah. The one where you talked about the plan working, about getting access to my accounts." Sarah's face had gone from pale to green. You were listening?" "I was," I said. "And I have to admit, I was impressed by the audacity. Tampering with an elderly person's medication to make them seem incompetent? That's not just cruel, it's criminal. elder abuse, medication tampering, fraud. The list goes on. David finally looked up from his plate. "Mom, we can explain." "No," I said, holding up my hand. "I don't want to hear explanations. I want to make something very clear to all of you." I stood up and walked to the head of the table where I'd left my purse. I pulled out the financial documents I'd brought with me. "You see, there's something you don't know about me," I said, holding up the papers. "Something I've kept quiet about for years because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I have." I handed the first document to Lisa, who was sitting closest to me. Her eyes widened as she read it. "That's my most recent investment statement," I said. "As you can see, I'm worth considerably more than any of you realized." The document was passed around the table, and I watched as each person's expression changed from confusion to shock to something approaching awe. $2.8 million, I said, letting the number hang in the air. "That's my current net worth. I own this house outright, which is worth about $400,000 in today's market. I have another $600,000 in my retirement accounts. I own 3 rental properties that generate about $60,000 a year in income. And I have over $1 million in various investments." David's jaw had dropped. Sarah looked like she might faint. "Now," I continued, "I had originally planned to leave most of this to my children when I passed away. Equal shares, with some set aside for my grandchildren's education. But recent events have made me reconsider." I pulled out another document. "This is my new will, which I had updated yesterday. David, because of your participation in this scheme to defraud me, you are no longer my heir. Your share will be distributed equally among Lisa and Michael." David shot to his feet. "Mom, you can't." "I can," I said firmly, "and I have. Sarah, since you seem so concerned about my financial affairs, let me make something clear. You will never see a penny of my money. Not while I'm alive, and not after I'm gone." I turned to Lisa and Michael. "As for you two, I hope you understand that this is what happens when family members try to take advantage of me. I worked too hard for too many years to let anyone steal from me, even my own family." The room was in chaos now. Sarah was crying, David was shouting, and Lisa and Michael were trying to process what they'd just learned. But I wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. I documented everything. The tampered medications, the strange pills, the conversations I overheard. I have photos, recordings, everything. I've already shared copies with my lawyer and my doctor. I looked directly at Sarah. Elder abuse is a felony in this state. Medication tampering is a federal crime. If you ever come near me or my medications again, I will have you arrested. Do I make myself clear? Sarah was sobbing now, and David was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he'd only seen what he wanted to see. A frail, confused old woman who could be easily manipulated. "I think it's time for me to go," I said, gathering my purse and my documents. "Thank you for dinner, but I won't be staying for dessert." As I walked toward the door, Lisa called out, "Mom, wait." I turned back to her. "Yes?" "I had no idea," she said, tears in her eyes. "I swear, I had no idea what they were doing." "I know," I said softly. "And that's why you're still in my will." I left that house with my head held high, feeling stronger and more empowered than I had in months. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't dizzy or confused or weak. I was exactly who I'd always been. A survivor, a fighter, a woman who wouldn't be taken advantage of. The next few days were quiet. I threw away all the medications that Sarah had tampered with and got fresh prescriptions from my pharmacy. I felt like myself again almost immediately. I also had a long conversation with my lawyer about pressing charges, and while he advised me that it might be difficult to prove, he assured me that I had enough evidence to make a strong case. But the most important thing I did was call my other children. I had honest conversations with Lisa and Michael about what had happened, about why I'd kept my financial situation private, and about my plans for the future. They were both supportive and understanding, and they assured me that they would never try to take advantage of me the way David and Sarah had. A week later, I got a call from David. He was sobbing on the phone, begging me to forgive him, claiming that Sarah had manipulated him into going along with her plan. He said he'd filed for divorce and wanted to make things right. I listened to his apologies, his excuses, his promises to change. And when he was finished, I said simply, "David, I will always love you because you're my son. But trust? That's something you'll have to earn back, and I'm not sure you ever will." I hung up the phone and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. I'd taken control of my life again, protected myself from people who would harm me, and made sure that my hard-earned money would go to people who truly deserved it. Looking back now, I realized that Sarah's betrayal was actually a gift. It forced me to be honest about my financial situation, to stop hiding who I really was. It made me realize that I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for, and that I didn't need to depend on anyone else to take care of me. I'm still living in my own home, still managing my own affairs, and still making my own decisions. I've hired a wonderful housekeeper who comes in twice a week, and I've joined a senior center where I've made some great friends. I'm healthier and happier than I've been in years. As for Sarah, I heard through the grapevine that she's facing some serious legal troubles. Apparently, I wasn't the only elderly person she'd been targeting. The authorities are investigating several cases of elder abuse connected to her, and she's looking at some serious jail time. David has tried to reach out several more times, but I'm not ready to forgive him yet. Maybe someday, but not today. Trust, once broken, is very difficult to repair, especially when it involves something as serious as what he and Sarah tried to do to me. I've learned some valuable lessons from this experience. First, never underestimate the power of greed to corrupt people, even those you love most. Second, always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And third, never let anyone make you feel powerless or dependent when you're perfectly capable of taking care of yourself. I'm proud of how I handled that situation. I could have been a victim, could have let them succeed in their plan to defraud me. Instead, I fought back, protected myself, and made sure that justice was served. I proved that just because I'm 73 years old doesn't mean I'm weak or helpless. The truth is, I'm probably stronger now than I was when I was younger. I've survived losing my husband, raising 3 children on my own, building a successful financial portfolio, and now surviving betrayal from my own family. Each challenge has made me more resilient, more determined, and more confident in my ability to handle whatever life throws at me. I want other women my age to know that they don't have to be victims. They don't have to let family members or anyone else take advantage of them. They have rights, they have power, and they have the ability to protect themselves. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions, like cutting off contact with toxic family members, or involving the authorities when crimes are committed. It's not easy to stand up to people you love, especially when those people are your own children. But sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you have to choose between being a victim and being a survivor, and I chose to be a survivor. My story didn't end with that family dinner, though. That was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. A chapter where I'm in control, where I'm living on my own terms, and where I'm not afraid to use my voice and my power to protect myself and others. I've since become involved in advocating for elder rights in my community. I speak at senior centers about financial protection, about recognizing the signs of elder abuse, and about the importance of having strong legal protections in place. I've helped several other elderly people who found themselves in similar situations, and I've worked with law enforcement to identify and prosecute elder abuse cases. It's become my mission to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other vulnerable seniors. I want them to know that they have options, that they have power, and that they don't have to suffer in silence. The money that I've accumulated over the years isn't just sitting in accounts anymore. I'm using it to make a difference. I've donated to organizations that fight elder abuse. I've helped fund legal aid for seniors who can't afford lawyers. And I've established a scholarship fund for young people who are studying gerontology or elder law. In a way, Sarah's betrayal led me to find my true purpose. I'm not just a victim who survived. I'm an advocate, a fighter, and a voice for people who might not be able to speak for themselves. I'm using my experience, my resources, and my energy to make the world a little bit safer for elderly people everywhere. That's my story. A story of betrayal, survival, and ultimately, triumph. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought I might not make it through. But I did make it through, and I'm stronger for it. I learned that age doesn't make you powerless, that family doesn't always mean loyalty, and that sometimes the most important person you can stand up for is yourself. I'm 73 years old. I'm worth nearly $3 million, and I'm not afraid to use either my age or my wealth to fight for what's right. Sarah thought she could take advantage of me because I was old and supposedly helpless. Instead, she discovered that I'm old and formidable, and that's a combination she never saw coming. So to anyone out there who might be facing a similar situation, whether it's family members trying to take advantage of you, people tampering with your medications, or anyone else who thinks they can abuse you because of your age, remember my story. Remember that you have more power than you think, that you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and that it's never too late to fight back. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're powerless just because you're older. Age can be a source of strength, wisdom, and determination. Use it. Fight back, protect yourself, and never, ever let anyone tell you that you don't have the right to live your life on your own terms. That's my advice, and that's my story. I survived, I fought back, and I won. And if I can do it, so can you.